This is a 3dfx Voodoo 5500, which apparently isn't working, so today we're gonna see if we can fix it up. Let's get started. So a little while ago, I decided I was finally going to purchase a Voodoo 5, but I didn't want to pay the ridiculous online prices. So I managed to find this one, which was in a not working state, for a reasonable price. Anyway, let's get straight into it and open up our testing machine, which is a Pentium 3 build. I'll remove the Voodoo 3 3000, which is currently in this system, and install the Voodoo 5. This card should be fully compatible, which is great. And there we go. Firing up the machine, as we can see, the Voodoo 5 is indeed not working. Although the system does power on, we're not getting any video output, which is a real shame. Let's get to some troubleshooting. Turning the card over, I can immediately see some missing and damaged components, so we'll need to replace those before we troubleshoot any further. I managed to find a components list for the Voodoo 5 online, and this allowed me to determine which parts I would need for the ones which were either missing or damaged. After ordering all the surface mount components online, they arrived a few weeks later. Let's get to replacing them. I'm first going to desolder one of the damaged components, which happens to be a resistor pack. Using careful application of hot air as well as some tweezers, I'm able to pretty quickly lift up the component and remove it successfully. Now I'm going to use some solder braid to remove the excess solder from the pads where the component previously sat, and then I'll apply some flux to get ready to place the new component in place. Now I'll go ahead and use my soldering iron and just touch it to either side, and there we go, component installed. Now I'm going to turn my attention to this other missing resistor, so I'll follow the same procedure, first using some solder braid to remove the excess solder, then I'll use a Q-tip to clean up the excess flux which I used to remove all of that. Now I'll go ahead and add some fresh flux for the component, which I'll then place, and I mucked up the soldering a bit here because I wasn't using my tweezers, but I quickly rectified it and got the component in place. Then I just soldered the other side. I followed that up with some more isopropyl alcohol to remove the flux, and look at that, perfect. Now we need to replace some capacitors, so I'll follow the same procedure. First of all, removing the excess solder using some solder braid. Next, I'll place some flux onto the solder pads to make it easier to solder our component in place. It's really fun to pipe this stuff on. Now we go ahead and place the IC, which in this case is a capacitor, and we just simply touch the solder to the component and pad. I'll repeat this for the other side too, and there we go, capacitor installed. We've only got one more component to replace now, so let's go ahead and get rid of all the old solder. Now we need to place some flux on the pads to make it easy to install our new component, and then we just simply place it there, get our soldering iron and solder one end. Then we can solder the other end with ease. And there we go, the final component is now installed. This was about 7 hours of work in total, so I really hope it works. Let's find out. After installing the card into the system, I crossed my fingers and hoped for the best. Let's fire it up. And what do you know, the card fires up. How amazing is that? After a little while it booted into Windows 98 just fine, so let's install the drivers for this card. They took a little while to install and it was a bit challenging, but eventually I managed to get them installed just fine. Going into the 3dfx Tools Hub, as we can see, the card appears to be working perfectly and is detecting just fine. There's plenty of options for me to play around with here, but checking the 3dfx info, as we can see the card detects perfect. Let's try out some games. Using the fastest performance mode in the 3dfx Tools menu and trying out a Quake 2 time demo just really shows this card's potential. Look at how fast it's going. That's just incredible. It's worth noting that this computer only has a Pentium 3 550, so it is a bit of a bottleneck, but it still serves fine as a testing system. As a bit of a stress test, I put the card on 4 sample anti-aliasing and then tried out some revolt at an 800 by 600 resolution. Loading into a game on the first map, it appears to be struggling a little bit, but it's definitely playable. It's a bit hard to notice in the video, but it's definitely a little bit choppy when you're playing it. So I think I'll stick to the fastest performance mode generally, though it is nice to see that it can do this amazing anti-aliasing technology. Well, that's about it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed this repair, and I'm so grateful to finally have a working Voodoo 5. You'll definitely be seeing this card used in a future build, so stick around for that. Anyway, that's about it from me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.